Hey again everyone, it's Danny, Senior Analytical Training Consultant here at SAS. And apparently we got stopped in our previous video about custom steps. So let's pick up where we left off. Now we've already planned the way that we're going to approach our custom step. Now it's actually time to build it and make the graphical user interface. So join me. Now, what you're going to notice at the very beginning is your canvas. This is my empty custom step. We are ready to decide what we're going to add, what we're going to do, and construct it all. Again, remember, this is the benefit of the custom step compared to the custom task. If I was doing a task right now, I'd be doing a lot of typing. Here, I'm going to be dragging and dropping and filling in properties. So it's kind of nicer. Less chances of you making a mistake. Now don't get me wrong. You can still make a mistake, but I'm going to point out things you need to watch out for to make sure that that is very limited. So as you can see here in the control library, you have the ability to add pages. Each page, I want you to think of tabs. Okay, now if you think back to the custom task, remember how the custom task had a data tab, an options tab, a model tab? Think of replacing that wording in your mind with the word page, a data page, an options page. It's the same thing. That's what I want to make sure that you see the similarities between the way you are building a custom task to the way you're building a custom step. So I can add as many pages, tabs, as I want, but what I will notice is that as I build them, I have to put properties in. Now, down here in the bottom left, you see a list of common objects and data objects. Now, I don't think I need to tell you that the data objects are going to be mainly talking about the actual data sets that are going to be utilized during our analyses. But all of the other commons are like we talked about previously. Do you want to use a checkbox? Do you want to use a radio button? So, we've made all of our decisions. We're going to do a K-class procedure. We've already generalized and expanded. We've made our decisions on what types of objects we're going to use. Let's build the GUI. Just making sure he didn't show up again. Okay, now, through the magic of YouTube, I've already got one made. So I'm going to shift to that and walk you through what I did. Bada boom. There you go. Now, notice that I've got multiple pages already. I have a data page tab, options page, and an output page. And I've already put things on here. I'll walk you through it. Don't panic. Now, on the data page, notice the first thing that you're going to see on the right is an ID property and a label property. Please always remember this. The ID property is the name of the macro that will be associated with this object. This is the most important thing you're going to have to remember for all of your objects. What did you call the ID? Now, what's this label part? Think of the label as nothing more than what does the user see on the actual custom step. So the word data in all caps here is what they see physically on the screen. But the lowercase data is the macro that will be associated with this object. Just keep that in mind. So we've got this data tab page. And so what do we need to add into it? Well, if I scroll down, kind of appropriately, to the data objects, the first thing I would drag in is the input table. What is the name of the input data set that you're wanting to use? So let me select it. See the bracket around it? See the nice little outline around it? That means it's the selected object. That means the right side shows the properties for it at this time. Again, be extremely careful and knowledgeable that input data is the name of the ID. That will be the macro variable. Again, the label is what do they see? Select table for analysis. What data table are you using? Now, the other options can be utilized dependent upon your requirements. Do you want to require the person to have to select a data table? Guess what? Do you see the red asterisk right there? That makes it a required entity. That's what that option does. Do you want to establish a default library? Do you want to establish a default table if your user doesn't pick one? Now, I will warn you about this. Whenever you create any type of customizable entity where you're giving power to your friends, colleagues, others, do you trust what they will pick? Could they possibly put themselves in a bad situation? If you want, I would suggest, very, very highly so, put in defaults so that if they fail to pick something or forget to pick something, you've covered for them. So good idea to do that. More so with some of our other objects, maybe not so much for the data part because they'll have to be able to navigate to their data set. So that's what these are basically down here, the default library, the default table, things like that. Now, once you have a data table that you're going to be using for input, now it's time for our variables. Now remember, in my K-class procedure, I have categorical variables and continuous variables that I will be referencing in different lines of my input statements. So you'll see that I've got two of these column selectors, one of which is for categorical variables, notice the name, cat vars, and then one for the continuous inputs, int vars. Now, again, the label is what you're going to see when they actually read it in the GUI. But do you see this link to input table? Very important. This establishes a natural linking between this object and your input data object. For example, it will parse through the data set that you've selected and it will pull out the variables for them to be able to choose from. But what types of variables do you want to manifest into your selections? Well, maybe you only want numeric variables to appear, or maybe you only want character variables to appear, or maybe you want them all to appear. Well, that's going to be dependent upon what this variable selector or this column selector is actually going to have a value to want to be useful as doing. So that's what column type does right here. You have the option of numeric, you have the option of all types, or you have the option of character in this particular case. Now, if you keep scrolling down, you're going to see plenty of other options of things that you can put together. The minimum number of columns that your user has to pick. The maximum number of columns. Interesting way to be able to play that out. And so, again, you would make the choices that are dependent upon what that object's role is inside of your graphical user interface. So, for example, in my categorical inputs, all types is picked because a categorical variable could be character or numeric. Depends on what the type of data set I'm looking at is. But a continuous input, an interval input, is going to be numeric. So therefore, I've got that there. So that's the data page, the data tab. Okay, so you would add a page. You'd have the default page that appears, and we'll bring in options. Now, again, with options selected over here, the page properties, you're going to give me the ID and you're going to give me the label again. Side note, do realize that you're probably not so much going to be needing the macro variable associated with the page name, as more so you will be invested in the macro variable for the objects that you create, because that's going to really contain the information. But do realize you want to be complete. Please make sure that the ID name and the label is filled for the actual pages themselves. So, what are our options? I like to think of the option area as those extending pieces. So, let's think about this. Remember we talked about the idea of the imputation. Do you want to impute or not to impute? What did we say was going to be the one for that? A checkbox. Notice, checkbox is in my object selector. I click and drag it. I've got two checkboxes right here. One that's going to ask a question about imputing the mean for a interval variable, and one asking, do I want to impute the mode for a nominal missing values in a variable. Now, that's because I could do one, I could do the other, I could do both, I could do neither. Great use of a checkbox. Now again, make the ID make sense and easy for you to remember. Put in the label appropriately for that. By the way, if you want any of these to be checked by default at the very beginning when your user comes into your interface, you have the option to pick that right there. I know you keep seeing the dependencies thing popping up. We'll get to that in a minute. Now, here's your radio button. You can bring this radio button group item into the options page. And again, it's going to start off with only showing you one option, but you're going to be able to extend that and add more choices. Again, pick your ID very carefully. Pick your label very nicely for the user to be able to read. Now, how do you add in the additional choices? So you'll notice that there's this add many option right here, but also I could type something out and click a plus. My favorite is the add many. Let me explain the reason why I like doing that. Because it allows me to do every bit of my typing at one instance. Then I click one item and it puts everything in. Now, if you do use the add many, sometimes the original default level of a radio button will be present. Don't panic. Just select that one, click the trash can, and that radio button level will disappear. So don't panic if that sticks around. You can always remove that. Now, you might notice that I have two columns here. One's called value, one's called label. Label is always what the user sees. Value is what is the representation if that's the choice. What does the macro variable for this radio button filled with? What is the value of that macro variable? How do I get that to appear? That's this lovely little button right here that is called map values. If you do not have that, then the label and the value are typically the same. But if SAS is expecting a keyword, this is a great place to use that. So for example, specify the number of clusters, calculate the number of clusters. Do I really want to ask a question of if the radio button says, and then this whole big phrase? Make life simple for yourself. Always use the values because you can make a one-word keyword that is what you're going to ask your Boolean question about in your code. Always think ahead. It's going to help you in the end. Now, once you've put in all of the different options that you want for your radio buttons, you'll notice you have an option for what is the default selection of the radio buttons, and you can pick whatever level that you wish to do. Now remember, we gave the user the option to also specify the number of clusters, right? Well, if they specify the maximum number of clusters that we want to use in this analysis, I'm going to need for them to put that information somewhere. Well, that means they're typing away. Please be careful. The more you let your users type, the more you're going to have to double check to make sure they don't do a mistake. Keep that in mind. Now, so I bring in this lovely text or numeric field item. Bring that object into play. Again, properly give it an ID, properly give it a label. Here you can say, is it going to be text or is it going to be a numeric field? Well, here we just want a number. So that's what I put as numeric. Now, again, be on the lookout and help your audience. What is the default value if they don't pick one? What is the minimum value that you're going to allow them to put in? What is the maximum that they're allowed to put in? This is a way that you can kind of make sure they don't put themselves in a bad position. Not a bad thing to deal with. But wait a minute. Should I always see the maximum number of clusters numeric line? No. If you tell me specify, yes, I need to see it because I've got to follow up by specifying how many. But if I choose calculate the number of clusters and I'm going to use a statistic to help me figure this out, do I need to tell you how many clusters to use? No, because that's going to be up to the diagnostic that's actually running in the background. Say hello to your dependencies. You may remember those from your areas of custom tasks. Now, here's how you figure out where to put the dependency. What object is appearing or disappearing based on something else? Well, it's the numeric item. So with the numeric item highlighted, do you see the dependencies area down here at the bottom? Expand that out. Now I know that this code looks a little bit interesting, but it is JSON UI code that basically gets filled in. And what that basically is in the visibility area says, if the radio cluster, remember, that's the ID of my radio button group, if it equals specify. See why I told you to put one word values into those radio buttons? Makes life simpler here. If the radio cluster says specify, show this numeric field. If that's not true, if you're on calculate, it'll be hidden. There's your dependencies. So I can still bring in dependencies just like we had before inside of a custom task. All right, well, those are all of our extensions for this problem. I add another page, and this is my output data set. Very easily bring in an output table. Careful, there's an input table object and there's an output table object. Drag that in, give it an ID, and give it a label. So, by the way, do you see this lovely preview button over here in the corner? If at any time you want to see what your step looks like, click that preview button. It'll allow you to test your dependencies. Watch. I'm going to click the preview button. It gives me another tab. Notice, it shows me my data, my options, my output. Do you see in options when specify is selected? That numeric typing item is there. When I click on calculate, poof, it's gone. So I know that my dependency is written correctly. Now, always remember, if you want to get out of the preview, you're going to have to go up to the tab that you're on and close it out. And then that way you can then go back to where you were on the custom step project that you were working on. So that's the GUI. One of the hard parts is done. So now it's time for us to move over into bringing the code in. Yes, again, because the video is too long. We're going to have to stop here and pick up again in another video. All right, so it looks like we're going to be finishing this up in another video. So thanks again, everybody, for joining us. Hope you've had fun. If you have any questions or any comments, make sure you leave them down below. And as always, like and subscribe. Take care.